There are certain things in life that we can only truly understand when we reach the twilight years, or when we witness our loved ones slowly grow old. The decline does not stem from a major event, but from very small, quiet, yet persistent changes over the years. Turning 83 is not a sudden threshold that makes one weak. Rather, it is the moment when we realize that the things that once quietly sustained our lives have gradually faded away. This is much like the story of Mr. Winny, who was once a brilliant, disciplined, and strong civil engineer. After retiring, he thought he would enjoy peaceful, tranquil days. Yet only a few years later, his life slowly became quieter, heavier, and even he could no longer recognize the person he once was. There was no major illness diagnosed, no sudden catastrophe. It was simply that, bit by bit, the small joys, the fragile connections, the familiar habits silently slipped away from him. And it is precisely the silent departure that truly makes a person grow old, not just physically, but also deep within their soul. Mr. Winny's story is not rare. Many people after the age of 80 go through the same blurry journey, even if they had once lived strong, independent, and lucid lives. In the following sections, we will explore 5 silent yet profound causes that impact the longevity and quality of life in the elderly, things that, if recognized in time, you can adjust either for yourself or for those you love. Before we dive deeper, if you feel that what is being shared here resonates with you or makes you think about your loved ones, don't forget to hit like to support this content. You can also subscribe to the channel to not miss out on more gentle yet deeply meaningful stories about life and aging. And if someone happens to come to mind, or if you have a personal experience you would like to share, please leave a comment below. I would love to read your thoughts because sometimes even a small story can warm the hearts of many others. Now let us embark on the journey to uncover the 5 silent yet profound reasons that changed Mr. Winny's life, as well as the lives of countless others. Reason 1, gradually losing a sense of purpose in everyday life. The first reason why Mr. Winny gradually lost his vitality stemmed from something very simple that few people notice: the loss of a sense of purpose in the small, ordinary days. It was not about grand ambitions or profound philosophies about life. It was merely about small, repeated actions day after day, but enough to make someone feel needed, to feel they still had a reason to keep moving forward. In the past, Mr. Winny lived with a very clear schedule. Every morning, he would dust his bookshelf, read the latest engineering news as part of his longtime engineer's habit. Beside his teapot, there was always a leather-bound notebook where he jotted down a few daily reflections. Every Tuesday, he would call his grandson to hear about his studies. When the sun was still gentle, he would step out onto the porch and water each flower bed with his own hands. All these things, though small, created a soft framework that supported his days. A life with rhythm, with anticipation, with continuity. Gradually, however, these activities became less frequent. His children grew busier with their own lives, and the phone calls became rarer. His weakening knees made standing to water the plants a daunting task. The pencil in his notebook lay quietly on top of a cupboard, gathering dust as the years went by. The mornings no longer had the sound of an alarm clock, nor any particular anticipation. He began waking up later, sometimes lingering under the covers, simply because there was no reason to get up early. Along with that, his sense of taste dulled, his memory faded, and the light in his eyes slowly dimmed. It wasn't until one day, during a casual conversation with a young architecture student who had just moved into the neighborhood, that Mr. Winny realized he still had value. The student had asked for his opinion on a foundation design. From those moments of being consulted and sharing his knowledge, Mr. Winny's eyes lit up again, and his voice became firmer. He dug out his old materials, resumed writing notes in his notebook, and rearranged his daily routine as before. And he realized that what he had been lacking was not health. What he had been lacking was a reason to wake up each morning, a silent message that someone, even just one person, still needed him. Sometimes just one small thing like that is enough to keep a heart beating passionately each day. Reason 2, the gradual loss of small connections. Besides a sense of purpose, the next thing that quietly slipped away from Mr. Winny was the small connections to the world around him, the invisible threads that we only truly notice once they are gone. Every morning, he used to have the habit of walking across the small street to the familiar cafe opposite his home. The table by the window always awaited him, along with a cup of black coffee with no sugar, just the way he liked it. He was not someone who enjoyed talking much, but he was familiar with the faces that appeared regularly. A nod of greeting, a gentle smile, and sometimes a few words exchanged with the young waitress who always remembered that he didn't like anything sweet. Those seemingly trivial interactions were, in fact, the lifeblood that nurtured the feeling of still being alive among people. Then one day he thought he should slow down. He began brewing coffee at home, sitting on the porch and listening to the sound of the wind, believing that this was true peace. But peace without human warmth can easily turn into cold, desolate stillness. There was no one left to greet him in the morning. No pair of eyes recognized his presence amidst the flow of life. A new neighbor moved in, but he did not bother to ask for their name. The sounds of laughter from the street gradually faded from his ears, giving way to the steady ticking of the wall clock. He did not feel a distinct sadness. It was simply that one day, he realized he had become faded, as if he were slowly stepping away from the canvas of life, unnoticed by others, and even by himself. Few people realize that those small interactions are how the human brain is activated daily, how emotions retain their warmth, and how the body recognizes that it is still part of a community. When those connections are lost, even if it is just a nod to the mailman or a smile to the street cleaner at the end of the alley, the body begins to send out signals of isolation, of retreating from life. One morning, for some reason, Mr. Winny decided to return to the old cafe. The table by the window was still there, although the young waitress from the past had been replaced by a different face. But when he walked in, an elderly man sitting nearby smiled at him as if welcoming back an old acquaintance. The cup of coffee in his hand at that moment carried not only the warmth of the drink, but also the warmth of recognition, the affirmation that he was still here, still belonged to this place. He realized then that connection does not necessarily have to be deep or long-lasting. As long as each day we can still see each other, greet each other, and smile at each other, it is enough to remind our hearts that we are not alone in this vast life. Reason 3, unresolved emotional loss. Among the silent forces that erode a person's vitality after the age of 80, perhaps none is as persistent and enduring as an unresolved loss. For Mr. Winny, that loss took the form of Evelyn, his wife who had accompanied him for over half a century. From the days when they were still young, dreamy university students, to the slow afternoons of strolling through the park, when their hands no longer gripped tightly, but still instinctively found each other in silence. Evelyn passed away peacefully, without pain, without warning, simply falling into a gentle sleep one night and never waking up again. Friends came to pay their respects, family members offered sincere words of comfort, and the grandchildren attentively handled the funeral arrangements. Mr. Winny did not cry. He simply nodded quietly, thanked each person, and then personally rearranged Evelyn's belongings, like a meticulous engineer tidying up a completed project. Yet deep inside, he knew there was a void he had never dared to touch. After the days of mourning, everyone returned to their busy lives, while his small home became unusually empty. Meals were eaten alone. Evenings no longer echoed with the familiar clacking of the keyboard, where Evelyn used to record her daily journal. He still went for walks, still smiled politely when someone told a funny story. He still carried the appearance of someone who was perfectly fine, but some nights he stayed awake in silence, staring at an empty chair. Some mornings he poured 2 cups of tea out of habit, only to realize he was now alone. The pain did not erupt in sobs or cries. Instead, it settled like a thin layer of dust, quietly covering every corner of his soul. And like all unacknowledged sorrows, it began to silently wear down his health, leading to insomnia, loss of appetite, and a gradual fading of memory without any clear cause. It was not until a small reunion with old friends, when someone gently mentioned the emptiness of losing a life companion, that Mr. Winny felt his throat tighten. After that gathering, he sat alone in his car for a long time, letting silent tears stream down his face, as if his body was finally exhaling after so many days of holding its breath. It was not because he was weak, but because he had denied himself the permission to grieve for too long. And when he finally began sharing sweet memories with his granddaughter, about Evelyn's laughter whenever they argued playfully, about the fragrant pastries she would bake every winter, he felt that she had never truly left. No one can replace the ones we have lost, but when memories are recalled, when sorrow is allowed to be present, it no longer remains a burden, but becomes a tender part of our past. More importantly, it reopens the door to emotions, helping Mr. Winny find himself again, after a long time of silently shutting himself away. Reason 4, circadian rhythm disruption due to changes in sleep habits. One of the silent changes that Mr. Winny did not realize until it had already quietly worn down his health was the disruption of his circadian rhythm, not caused by aging itself, but by losing the natural rhythm that had accompanied him all his life. In his younger days, he was always a morning person, waking up with the first rays of sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, brewing a pot of hot tea, and beginning the day with the orderliness and discipline of an engineer. At night, he would go to bed early, preparing himself to greet the next day with a clear and refreshed body. But since retiring, when alarm clocks were no longer necessary and no work awaited him each morning, everything started to shift quietly. He stayed up later, lingered longer in bed each morning. In the evenings, the house became so quiet that he would leave the television murmuring throughout the night just to fill the emptiness. During cold winter days, he kept the curtains tightly drawn, forgetting the feeling of sunlight streaming through the windows, warming his skin, awakening his eyes. He did not realize that without exposure to natural light, and with his daily schedule becoming increasingly disordered, his body gradually lost the ability to distinguish between day and night. Sleepiness no longer arrived at the right times. His naps stretched into restless afternoons, and he awoke each morning feeling sluggish, his mind slow, his memory increasingly blurry without knowing why. He drank stronger tea, turned to heavier coffee, trying to force himself awake, but only ended up feeling more exhausted. It wasn't until a routine health check when the doctor gently asked, "Have you been going outside to get some morning sunlight lately?" that Mr. Winny was startled to realize how long it had been since he last embraced that gentle light which had once been a part of his every day. The advice was simple: step out onto the porch each morning, soak in natural sunlight for at least 15 minutes, and turn off old devices emitting blue light an hour before bedtime. These seemingly small changes, once he patiently incorporated them into his routine, brought surprising results. His sleep gradually became deeper, and he awoke feeling more refreshed. In the mornings, when the sunlight gently kissed his face, it felt as if his body was being awakened anew. His bedroom changed too, with less artificial lighting, allowing real sunlight to become the natural bell that signaled the start of each day. He realized that the human body needs not only food or medicine, but also light, rhythm, and gentle reminders that a new day is beginning, that life is still unfolding. Alertness during the day does not start with a bitter cup of coffee, but with the very first rays of sunlight we open ourselves to after a long night. Reason 5, excessive caution leading to lack of physical activity. Finally, among the things that gradually caused Mr. Winny to lose his vitality, perhaps the most silent was excessive caution, a kind of caution often mistaken for the wisdom of old age. One afternoon after a light rain, while leisurely walking home from his familiar grocery store, he slipped on a wet tile. It was not a serious injury, just a minor fall that left him stunned for a few seconds. Yet that sudden fear gripped him more tightly than any bruise on his body. From that day on, he began avoiding tiled paths, and eventually he avoided walking in the afternoons altogether. His walking shoes remained neatly placed by the cupboard, but the chair by the window saw increasingly more use. He told himself he needed to be careful, that at his age, a single fall could have serious consequences. However, what he did not realize was that stopping movement altogether was what truly accelerated his physical decline. When legs are used less, they gradually lose strength. When the heart is no longer driven by steady footsteps, its rhythm slows, and stamina quietly erodes bit by bit. Standing up from a chair became slower, walking became heavier, not because he had grown too old, but because his body had forgotten how to move, forgotten how to trust itself. Until one day, during a simple visit with an old friend, amidst laughter and jokes, someone half-jokingly said, "You're healthier than most young people nowadays. Just being able to walk is a blessing." That comment echoed in Mr. Winny's heart for many days. Then one morning, instead of silently staring out the window, he stood up, put on his shoes, and stepped outside. At first, it was just a few hundred meters around the neighborhood. His steps were still slow and cautious, but day by day, the distance grew longer. He bought a sturdy-handled walking cane for added confidence and chose shoes with better grip. The most important thing was not the speed, but the feeling that his body could still move, still feel alive, still exist in this life. Those small steps not only helped him regain his physical resilience, but also awaken the spirit that had quietly fallen asleep within him. Each step became a message to himself, reminding him that he was still here, still moving forward slowly but surely, and never truly stopping. Looking back on his journey, Mr. Winny understood that his life had not changed because of some miraculous magic, nor was it thanks to complex medical treatments or profound advice. What truly saved him were the small, simple changes, carried out persistently and patiently every single day. One act each morning to give himself a reason to wake up a little earlier. One glance, one nod, one smile to someone passing by. One heartfelt conversation to release the hidden pains within his heart. One moment sitting under the morning sun to awaken the body's natural rhythm. One slow but steady step, reminding himself that he was still present in this world. There was nothing grand or magnificent, just small habits, small emotions, small connections. Yet it was precisely these, not the major upheavals, that form the quiet foundation supporting a person through the passing years of old age. Mr. Winny, at the age of 83, was still an old man. His eyes were no longer as sharp, his legs no longer as quick as they once were. But thanks to those small changes, his heart remained warm, still beating with anticipation each day. Not because time had stopped, but because he chose not to let his soul wither with the passing of time. And you who are listening to this story can also begin with something very small. A simple greeting, a walk under the sunny porch, a moment of allowing yourself to remember, to grieve, to feel joy, to live fully, even if just for a fleeting moment. Old age, if written with subtlety, connection, and courage, will not merely be a long stretch of days, but will become a truly beautiful, profound, and meaningful chapter of life. If this story touches you, share one small change you would like to begin today. Because sometimes just one small action is enough to change an entire soul.